Hey guys, welcome to our daily encounter. I don't think that really any of us really like to go through hard times. We don't really like to go through those dark valleys in life. Those times in which challenges come up against us, those times when perhaps tragedy meets us, those times when life becomes dark and dreary and each day just becomes a struggle. And those times in which we wrestle with God and we go to Him in prayer and we're seeking His strength, His counsel, but also His help in the situation. And we feel very weak. We feel very much powerless against our circumstances and our situations. And those times just aren't very pleasant. It's not something that we typically enjoy experiencing. And we see Jacob experiencing this in our reading today. Here in chapter 32, Jacob has already left Laban. Laban had chased after him. They kind of make amends, and then Jacob continues on, and he turns his face towards the land of his family, and he has to face Esau. And he hears that Esau is coming towards him with hundreds of men. And so Jacob is extremely afraid. He comes up with a plan to send gifts to Esau to kind of butter him up and to try to smooth things over with him. But then we also find in chapter 32, Jacob at night wrestling with God in the darkness. And there we see that Jacob wrestles all night with the Lord. The Lord touches his socket, his hip, basically, and gets loose from Jacob. And then there's this encounter between Jacob and the Lord, where the Lord says, let me go, for the dawn is breaking. But he said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. So he said to him, what is your name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel. For you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed. And then Jacob asked him and said, please tell me your name. But he said, why is it that you ask me my name? And he blessed him there. So Jacob named the place Peniel. For he said, I have seen God face to face, yet my life has been preserved. Now the sun rose upon him just as he crossed over Peniel, and he was limping on his thigh. And so he has this strange encounter with the Lord, and all of these things take place. And again, Jacob is in a rough spot. He's afraid because of what was coming. He knew that his brother Esau was coming at him, and they had hundreds of men with him, and he can only assume that Esau meant his harm based on their history. And he wrestles with the Lord here, seeks a blessing from the Lord. And what we find on the other side of this really is transformation. Jacob finds newness after the darkness. And I think this is symbolic with him in verse 31, where it says, now the sun rose upon him just as he crossed over Peniel, and he was limping on his thigh. The darkness that he went through led to the breaking of the day and the newness that came out of that. And there's a lot of new things that Jacob acquired out of this very dark experience. He acquired a new name, no longer Jacob, but now Israel. He acquired a new blessing. The Lord blessed him in this instance there in verse 29, and he blessed him there. He received a new testimony. He says there, when he named the place Peniel, he said, I have seen God face to face, and yet my life was preserved. And that would be a testimony that he could take with him the rest of his life. He received a new reminder of his weakness. Not only did he become injured while he was wrestling, but we assume for the rest of his life, he probably walked away with a limp. At least for the next day, he walked with a limp, which would have been a constant reminder of how weak he was. Yes, he prevailed against the Lord, but at the same time, the Lord prevailed over him in the sense that he brought out the weakness of Jacob. And Jacob would be reminded of that over time. And so all these new things came out of this dark experience: a new name, a new blessing, a new testimony, a new day, a new reminder of his weakness. A lot of newness sprang up from the darkness. And just as that happens with the earth, as the earth goes under the shadow of darkness at night, only to eventually make it to the brightness of a new day, so the same thing happens to us spiritually. We go through those dark nights of the soul, those times of difficulty and hardship, the times when we don't know how things are going to play out, the times of uncertainty and anxiety, of striving and wrestling with God. But when we're in those times, it's important for us to recognize that God has new things in store for us when we come out of the darkness. Eventually the darkness will go away. Eventually the day will dawn. Eventually the day will spring forth. And out of that darkness will come new things. And it might be some of the similar things to what Jacob received here. He received a new name, that is a new identity. He received a new blessing. There might be a blessing that comes out of the hard times that we encounter. Maybe a blessing that we never would have imagined when we entered into the darkness. We will receive a new testimony where we can go out and tell others, hey, I was in this dark time. I was in this time of tragedy, of difficulty, and this is how the Lord brought me through. And that testimony can help other people, and we can show them how we encountered God by wrestling with God in prayer during those dark times, and how the Lord helped us in those situations. And then when we come out of the darkness, it might very well be the case that we'll keep with us a reminder of our weakness as we look back on how helpless we were and how powerless we were in the midst of those circumstances and those situations. We can look back on those and say, you know what, maybe I'm not as strong as I thought I was. Maybe I don't have it all together like I thought I did before entering into the darkness. And day by day, perhaps we'll have a reminder of our utter dependence upon God and his help and his strength and his guidance. And so just as Jacob received new things that sprang up out of the darkness, so the same thing can happen with us as well. If we encounter the darkness by faith, if we go to the Lord in prayer and wrestle with the Lord in prayer, we too can find transformation. We too can find newness on the other side. And we'll look on the other side back at the darkness and say, yeah, it was tough. It was difficult, but we had things to gain in the darkness. And we still have those things with us even today. So here's some things we can reflect on and think about as we do our reading today. With that, guys, I do thank you for watching the video today. Hope you guys have a great day. Love you guys. God bless.